Kuyo Shobutsu, Serving Offerings to Buddhas, by Eihei Dogen, from Shobogenzo, the Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. The Buddha said, "If there were no past ages, there could be no past Buddhas. If there were no past Buddhas, there would be no leaving family life and receiving ordination." Clearly remember, in the 3 ages without fail, Buddhas exist. Now, with regard to past Buddhas, do not say that they have a beginning, and do not say that they have no beginning. If we falsely suppose the existence or non-existence of a beginning and an end, we are not learning the Buddha Dharma at all. Those who serve offerings to past Buddhas and leaving family life, follow and obey them, inevitably become Buddhas. They become Buddhas by virtue of serving Buddhas. How could living beings who have never served offerings to even a single Buddha themselves become Buddha? There can be no becoming Buddha without cause. Butsu Hongyo Jikyo, Chapter 1, Serving Offerings, says, "The Buddha told Maud Galiana, 'I remember in the past, in the orders of countless infinite world-honored ones, I planted many good roots and sought after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi.' Maud Galiana, I remember in the past, I assumed the body of a sacred wheel-rolling king and met 30 kotis of Buddhas, all who shared one name and were named Shakya. The Tathagata and a host of Shravakas worshipped them, waited upon them, venerated them, and served offerings to them, furnishing them with the 4 things, namely, clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine. At that time, those Buddhas did not give me the affirmation that you will attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and become understander of the world, teacher of gods and human beings, and world-honored Buddha. In a future age, you will be able to realize the right state of truth." Maud Galiana, I remember in the past, I assumed the body of a sacred wheel-rolling king and met 8 kotis of Buddhas, all who shared one name and were named Burning Torch. The Tathagata and a host of Shravakas worshipped and venerated them and served them offerings of the 4 things, namely, clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine, and banners, canopies, flowers, and incense. At that time, those Buddhas did not give me the affirmation that you will attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi and become understander of the world, teacher of gods and human beings, and world-honored Buddha. Maud Galliana, I remember in the past I assumed the body of a sacred wheel-rolling king and met 3 kotis of Buddhas, all who shared one name and were named Pusya. The Tathagata and a host of Shravakas furnished them completely with offerings of the 4 things. At that time, those Buddhas did not give me the affirmation that you will become Buddha. Besides these, he served offerings to innumerable other Buddhas. In the body of a sacred wheel-rolling king, he would invariably have ruled 4 continents. Materials for serving offerings to Buddhas truly must have been plentiful. If he was a great wheel-rolling king, he would have been the king of a 3,000-fold world. The serving of offerings at that time would be beyond the imagination of common people today. Even if the Buddha explained it, it might be hard to comprehend. Butsuzo Kuyo, Chapter 8, The Pure View, says, the Buddha told Shariputra, I remember in the past seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. I met 30 kotis of Buddhas, all named Shakyamuni. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime, for the purpose of seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, I served to Buddha and disciples offerings of clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine. Yet those Buddhas did not affirm me by saying, in a coming age you will be able to become Buddha. Wherefore? Because I had expectation of gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past I was able to meet 8,000 Buddhas, all named constant light. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime, for the purpose of seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, I served to Buddha and disciples offerings of clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine. Yet these Buddhas did not affirm me by saying, in a coming age you will be able to become Buddha. Wherefore? Because I had expectation of gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past I met 60,000 kotis of Buddhas, all named brightness. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime, for the purpose of seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, I served to Buddha and disciples offerings of clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine. Yet those Buddhas did not affirm me by saying, "In a coming age, you will be able to become Buddha." Wherefore? Because I had expectation of gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, I met 3 kotis of Buddhas, all named Pusya. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and served offerings of the 4 things. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, I was able to meet 18,000 Buddhas, all named Mountain King. The Kalpa was called the Upper 8. In the orders of all these 18,000 Buddhas, I shaved my hair and dyed a robe, and I trained in Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, I was able to meet 500 Buddhas, all named flowers above. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and served offerings of every kind to the Buddhas and their disciples. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past, I was able to meet 500 Buddhas, all named majestic virtue. I served offerings to them all. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, I was able to meet 2,000 Buddhas, all named Kaundinya. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and served to the Buddhas offerings of every kind. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, I met 9,000 Buddhas, all named Kasyapa. I served offerings of the 4 things to the Buddhas and their hosts of disciples. All did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past, for 10,000 kalpas, no Buddha appeared. In the first 500 kalpas of that period, there were 90,000 Pratyeka Buddhas. Throughout lifetimes, I served them all offerings of clothes, food and drink, bedding and medicine, and I worshipped and praised them. In the next 500 kalpas, I served offerings of the 4 things to a further 84,000 kotis of Pratyeka Buddhas, and I worshipped and praised them. Shariputra, after these 1,000 kalpas, there were no more Pratyeka Buddhas. I then died in Jambudvipa and was born in a Brahma world, becoming great King Brahma. Thus I proceeded for 500 kalpas, always being born in a Brahma world and becoming great King Brahma, never being born in Jambudvipa. After these 500 kalpas, I was born down in Jambudvipa, and I governed Jambudvipa. But when my life ended, I was born in the heaven of the 4 kings. When my life there ended, I was born in Traya's Trimsa heaven, becoming Sakra Devanam Indra. Thus I proceeded, completing 500 kalpas, before being born in Jambudvipa, then completing 500 kalpas, being born in a Brahma world, and becoming great King Brahma. Shariputra, in 9,000 kalpas, only once was I born in Jambudvipa. For 9,000 kalpas, I was born only in the heavens above. At the time of the Holocaust, which ends a kalpa, I was born in the heaven of luminous sound. But once the world was created, I was again born in a Brahma world. For 9,000 kalpas, I was never again born among human beings. Shariputra, in those 9,000 kalpas, there were no Buddhas or Pratyeka Buddhas, and many living beings fell into evil ways. Shariputra, after the passing of these 10,000 kalpas, there appeared in the world a Buddha named Universal Protector, Tathagata, one who deserves offerings, rightly all-enlightened one who is perfect in knowledge and action, one who has fared well, understander of the world, Supreme One, controller of men, teacher of gods and human beings, world-honored Buddha. At that time, when my life finished in a Brahma world, and I was born in Jambudvipa, I became a sacred wheel-rolling king named Communal Heaven, whose human lifespan was 90,000 years. I spent this lifetime serving offerings of all kinds of comforts to that Buddha and to 90 kotis of bhikkhus for 90,000 years, for the purpose of seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. This Buddha, Universal Protector, also did not affirm me by saying, "In a coming age, you will be able to become Buddha." Wherefore? Because at that time I could not fully understand that all dharmas are real form, and I was greedily attached to the gaining view of the calculating self. Shariputra, during that kalpa there appeared 100 Buddhas, each named differently. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and spent a lifetime serving offerings to Buddha and disciples, for the purpose of seeking after Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Yet these Buddhas also did not affirm me by saying, "In a coming age, you will be able to become Buddha." This was because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past, during the 700th Asankaya of Kalpas, I was able to meet 1,000 Buddhas, all named Jambunanda. I spent lifetimes serving them offerings of the 4 things. They also did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past, again during the 700th Asankaya of Kalpas, I was able to meet 620 myriad Buddhas, each named seeing all forms. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime I served offerings of all comforts to Buddha and disciples. They also did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past again during the 700th Asankaya of Kalpas, I was able to meet 84 Buddhas, all named imperial form. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime I served offerings of all comforts to Buddha and disciples. They also did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in the past, again during the 700th Asankaya of Kalpas, I was able to meet 15 Buddhas, all named Sun Bright. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime I served offerings of all comforts to Buddha and disciples. They also did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Shariputra, I remember in a past age, again during the 700th Asankaya of Kalpas, I was able to meet 62 Buddhas, all named Good Serenity. I then, for every one of them, became a sacred wheel-rolling king, and throughout a lifetime I served them offerings of all comforts. They also did not affirm me, because I was expecting gain. Thus I proceeded until I met the Buddha Constant Light, and instantly attained realization of non-appearance. Immediately the Buddha Constant Light affirmed me, saying, "In an age to come, after the passing of Asankaya Kalpas, you will be able to become a Buddha named Shakyamuni Tathagata, one who deserves offerings, rightly all enlightened one who is perfect in knowledge and action, one who has fared well, understander of the world, supreme one, controller of men, teacher of gods and human beings, world-honored Buddha." From meeting in the beginning with 30 kotis of Shakyamuni Buddhas, and serving offerings to them throughout lifetimes until meeting with constant light Tathagata. In all cases, he constantly spends lifetimes serving offerings in the body of a sacred wheel-rolling king. Sacred wheel-rolling kings may often be more than 80,000 years of age. His service of offerings is the service of offerings of all kinds of comforts throughout a lifetime of sometimes 90,000 years and sometimes 80,000 years. Constant light Buddha means burning torch Tathagata. In both sutras, he meets 30 kotis of Shakyamuni Buddhas. The preaching of the Butsu Hongyo Jikyo and of the Butsuzo Kyo are the same. Shakya Bodhisattva, in the first Asamkhaya, met, attended, and served offerings to 75,000 Buddhas. The first, named Shakyamuni, and the last, named Jewel Topknot. In the second Asamkhaya, he met, attended, and served offerings to 76,000 Buddhas. The first, that same Jewel Topknot, and the last named Burning Torch. In the third Asamkhaya, he met, attended, and served offerings to 77,000 Buddhas. The first, that same Burning Torch, and the last named Excellent Reflection. While cultivating the signs and karma of different maturation for 91 kalpas, he met, attended, and served offerings to 6 Buddhas. The first, that same Excellent Reflection, and the last named Kasyapa. In general, in his service of offerings to Buddhas for 3 great Asamkhayas of kalpas, there was nothing spared at all. Beginning with his own body and life, through kingdoms and cities, wives and children, the 7 treasures, male and female servants, and so on. It is beyond the common intellect. He served offerings of silver bowls, filled to the brim with golden millet, or of gold and silver bowls, filled to the brim with 7 treasure millet. Or he served offerings of azuki beans, or flowers of water and land, or sandalwood, aloes, and other incense. Or he served to the Buddha burning torch, offerings of 5-stalked blue lotus flowers, bought for 500 pieces of gold and silver. Or he served this Buddha with the offering of a deer skin robe. As a general rule, in making offerings to Buddhas, it is not that we serve offerings of what might be essential to Buddhas without delay, while life remains to us, without passing any time in vain. We serve offerings. Of what benefit to Buddhas are even gold and silver? Of what benefit to Buddhas are even incense and flowers? Rather, that Buddhas accept is due to great kindness and great compassion in allowing living beings to increase merit. The Maha Parinirvana Sutra, fascicle 22, says, "The Buddha preached, 'Good sons, I remember countless ineffate nayutas of kalpas ago. When the world was called Saha, there was a world-honored Buddha named Shakyamuni Tathagata, one who deserves offerings, rightly all-enlightened one who is perfect in knowledge and action, one who has fared well, understander of the world, supreme one, controller of men, teacher of gods and human beings, world-honored Buddha.' For many great assemblies, he expounded the great Nirvana Sutra like this. I, at the time, turning from a place of good friends, heard that the Buddha was going to preach the great Nirvana Sutra to a great assembly. After I had heard this, my heart rejoiced, and I wanted to prepare a service of offerings. Being of humble abode and without possessions, I intended to barter my own body. Unfortunately, it did not sell. Then, intending to return home, I met a man on the road and told him, 'I want to sell my body. Could you not buy me, sir?' The man replied, 'The work I have at my home is beyond human endurance. If you could do it, I would buy you.' I then asked him, 'What work is there that is beyond human endurance?' Veritably, that man replied, 'I have a terrible illness for which a good doctor has prescribed the following medicine. I am to take daily 3 pounds of human flesh. If you can really supply me with 3 pounds of your body's flesh every day, I will give you 5 gold coins.' Then, having heard this, I rejoiced in my heart. I told him further, 'If you give me the coins and allow me 7 days, when I have finished my own business, I will be obliged to return at once and work for you.' Veritably, that man replied, 7 days is impossible. If you are able to do exactly as I have described, I will permit you 1 day. Good sons, I then took these coins and returned to the place of Buddha. I bowed my head and face to his feet and offered to him all that I possessed. After that, with a sincere mind, I listened to this sutra. At this time, being dull and stupid, although I was able to hear the sutra, I was only able to receive and retain the words of one verse. The Tathagata experienced nirvana and forever eradicated life and death. If with sincerity you listen, constantly you will attain boundless joy. After receiving this verse, I went straight back to the home of that sick man. Good sons, although then I indeed gave him 3 pounds of flesh every day, with remembrance of the verse as a direct and cooperating cause, I completed a month without feeling pain and without missing a day. Good sons, due to this direct and cooperating cause, the illness was cured and my own body healed without even a scar. At that same time, seeing that my body was perfectly sound, I instantly established the will to Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. The power of even a single verse can be like this. How much more might be the power of completely receiving, retaining, reading, and reciting the sutra. Seeing that this sutra had such efficacy, I established the will over and over, and vowed that in the future, if I were able to realize the Buddha's truth, I would be named Shakyamuni Buddha. Good sons, it is by virtue of the direct and cooperating influence of this single verse that I am today caused to expound the sutra completely to the gods and human beings in the great assembly. Good sons, therefore this heavenly state of nirvana is unthinkable. It accomplishes countless and infinite merits. Just this is the profound secret treasury of the Buddha Tathagatas. The Bodhisattva of that age, who sold his body, is the antecedent of the Shakyamuni Buddha of the present age. By referring to other sutras, we can know that the beginning of the first Asamkhya of Kalpas was the time when he served offerings to the old Shakyamuni Buddha. In that age, he was a tiler, and his name was Great Brightness. When he served offerings to the old Shakyamuni Buddha and disciples, he made offerings of 3 kinds: straw cushions, sugared drinks, and torches. At that time he made the following vow: my national land, name, lifespan, and disciples shall be exactly the same as those of this Shakyamuni Buddha. The vow he made then has already been realized today. Therefore, when thinking of serving offerings to Buddhas, never say that your body is destitute, and never say that your household is destitute. This story of selling one's own body in order to serve offerings to Buddhas is the right dharma of the present great master Shakyamuni, who could not be overjoyed by it. In it, the Bodhisattva meets a taskmaster who every day slices off 3 pounds of body flesh. This would be beyond the endurance of any other person, even a friend in virtue. Yet, aided by a profound will to serve offerings, the Bodhisattva possesses the virtue described now. Our listening now to the Tathagata's right Dharma may be body-flesh from that distant age being distributed. The present four-line verse is beyond being traded for 5 gold coins. During 3 asamkhayas of kalpas, or 100 great kalpas, in the reception of lives and the relinquishment of lives, it has not been forgotten, and in the orders of that Buddha and this Buddha it has continued to be substantiated. Truly, it may possess unthinkable virtue. Disciples to whom the Dharma has been bequeathed should receive and retain it with profound humility. The Tathagata himself has already proclaimed that the power of even a single verse can be like this. The virtue of the verse may be immensely profound. The Lotus Sutra says, if people to stupas and shrines, to jewel images and painted images, with flowers, incense, banners and canopies, reverently serve offerings, or if they cause others to make music, to beat drums, to blow horns and conches, to play panpipes, flutes, lutes, lyres, harps, gongs, and cymbals, and many fine sounds such as these, they bring forth entirely as offerings, or if, with joyful hearts, they sing the praises of the Buddha's virtue, even in one small sound, they all have realized the Buddha's truth. If people whose mind is distracted with even a single flower serve offerings to a painted Buddha image, they will gradually see numberless Buddhas. Again, people who do prostrations or who simply join palms, even those who raise a hand or slightly lower the head, and thus serve an offering to an image, will gradually see countless Buddhas, will naturally realize the supreme truth, and will widely save numberless multitudes. This is the very brains and eyes of the Buddhas of the 3 times, and we should strive headlong to meet the sages and emulate them. Do not pass time in vain. Great Master Sakito Musai says, do not pass time in vain. Virtue like this, in every case, realizes Buddha. Past, present, or future, it must be the same. There can never be 2 or be 3 people who, due to the cause of serving offerings to Buddhas, realize the effect of becoming Buddha, are like this. The ancestral master, Nagarjuna, said, "When we are pursuing the Buddha effect, to praise a single verse, to chant a single namas, to burn a single pinch of incense, to offer a single flower, small actions like these, without fail, enable us to become Buddha." Although this is the preaching of the ancestral master and bodhisattva Nagarjuna alone, we should devote our life to it. Still more, it is the preaching of the great master Shakyamuni Buddha, as authentically transmitted and upheld by the ancestral master Nagarjuna, that we now, climbing the treasure mountain of the Buddha's truth and entering the treasure ocean of the Buddha's truth, fortunately have obtained treasure, is most joyful. It may be the influence of vast kalpas of offerings to Buddhas. We must not doubt that without fail we are able to become Buddha. It is assured. The preaching of Shakyamuni Buddha is like this. Furthermore, there are causes of small direct cause having a great effect, and of small circumstantial causes having great results. When we are pursuing the Buddha's truth, to praise one verse, to chant Namas Buddha once, or to burn one pinch of incense, inevitably enables us to become Buddha. Still more, if we hear and know that all dharmas are real form, beyond appearance and disappearance, and beyond non-appearance and non-disappearance, then whatever causal and circumstantial karma we enact, we will never fail at all. The ancestral master, Nagarjuna, has intimately received the authentic transmission of the world-honored one's preaching, which is as conspicuous as this. This preaching possesses the right and traditional transmission of the golden words of genuine truth. Even if it is the preaching of ancestral master Nagarjuna himself, it should not be compared with the preaching of other masters. That we have been able to meet his authentic transmission and propagation of that which the world-honored one displayed is most joyful. Do not randomly compare these sacred teachings with the empty elaborations of common teachers of the Eastern land. The ancestral master Nagarjuna said, "Furthermore, because Buddhas revere Dharma, they serve offerings to Dharma and make the Dharma their teacher. Why? Because the Buddhas of the 3 times all make all dharmas are real form into their teacher." Someone asks, why do they not serve offerings to the Dharma within their own bodies, but only serve offerings to the Dharma in others? I answer, They follow the way of the world. When a bhikkhu wants to serve offerings to the treasure of Dharma, he does not serve offerings to the Dharma within his own body, but serve offerings to others who are retaining the Dharma, who know Dharma, and who understand Dharma. Buddhas also are like this. Even though the Dharma is present in their own bodies, they serve offerings to the Dharma in other Buddhas. Someone asks, given that Buddhas do not seek to gain merit, for what reason do they serve offerings? I answer, Buddhas, for countless asamkhayas of kalpas, cultivate all virtues and constantly practice all forms of good, but not in pursuit of reward. Because they revere virtue itself, therefore they perform the service of offerings. For instance, when the Buddha was living, there was a blind bhikkhu who, though his eyes saw nothing, sewed robes by his own hand. Once his needle came unthreaded, and he said, "Is there any lover of merit who will thread the needle for me?" Then the Buddha came there and told the bhikkhu, "I am a person who loves merit, so I have come to thread your needle for you." The bhikkhu recognized the Buddha's voice. He promptly stood up, put on a robe, and bowed at the Buddha's feet. He said to the Buddha, "The Buddha has already fully accomplished virtue. Why did you say that you love merit?" The Buddha replied, "Although I have accomplished virtue already, I profoundly know the causes of virtue, the effects and results of virtue, and the power of virtue. That I now have attained preeminence among all living beings stems from this virtue. For this reason I love it." The Buddha, having praised virtue for this bhikkhu, then spontaneously preached to him the Dharma. This bhikkhu attained purity of the Dharma eye, whose clarity was beyond eyes of flesh. I heard this story long ago, during a nighttime talk in the room of my late master. Thereafter, I was able to check it against the sentences of Dai Chidoron, the instructor of the ancestral master of the Dharma transmission had been clear, and he had left nothing out. These sentences are in Dai Chidoron, fascicle number 10, that the Buddhas invariably treat all Dharmas are real form, as their great teacher is evident. Shakyamuni also approved the usual method of all the Buddhas. Their treating all Dharmas are real form, as their great teacher, means their service of offerings to, and veneration of, the three treasures of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Buddhas, for countless asamkhayas of kalpas, accumulate innumerable virtues and good roots without seeking any reward at all. they simply serve offerings in veneration of virtue itself. Having arrived at the state that is the Buddha effect of Bodhi, they still love small acts of virtue, and so the Buddha threads the needle for the blind bhikkhu. If we hope to clarify the virtue that is the Buddha effect, the present story is an exact account of it. Therefore, the virtue which is the Buddha effect of Bodhi, and the truth which is all dharmas are real form, are not as in the thoughts of common men in the world today. Common men today think that all dharmas are real form, might apply to the commitment of wrongs, and they think that the Buddha effect of Bodhi might only relate to gain. False views like these, even if they see 80,000 kalpas, never escape the essentialist view of past kalpas and the trivialist view of future kalpas. How can they perfectly realize the all dharmas are real form that Buddhas alone, together with Buddhas, perfectly realize? The reason they cannot is that what Buddhas alone, together with Buddhas, perfectly realize is just all dharmas are real form. Broadly, there are 10 kinds of service of offerings, namely 1. Serving offerings to a person. 2. Serving offerings to a kaichya. 3. Serving offerings to what is actually present. 4. Serving offerings to what is not actually present. 5. Service of offerings performed by oneself. 6. Service of offerings performed by others. 7. Serving offerings of property. 8. Serving offerings of excellence. 9. Untainted service of offerings. 10. Serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. Among these, number 1, serving offerings to a person, is explained as follows. Performing the service of offerings to a Buddha's physical body is called serving offerings to a person. Number 2, making offerings to a Buddha's shrine is called serving offerings to a kaichya. Sogi Ritsu says, one containing bones is called a stupa. One without bones is referred to as a kaichya. Some say that both are called kaichyas. Further, the Sanskrit word stupa, pronounced chuba, is here translated as square tomb or shrine. The Agamas say shicha. Whether we call it a stupa or whether we call it a kaichya, it appears to be the same. On the other hand, great Zen master Nangaku Eishi's Hoki Sembo says, wholeheartedly we bow in veneration to the satras, to the images of honored ones, to the kaichyas, to the wonderful stupas, and to the Tathagata abundant treasures, and the treasure stupa that is his whole body, of worlds in the 10 directions. Clearly, in these words, kaityas and stupas, sariras and images of honoured ones, seem to be separate. Sogi Ritsu, fascicle 33, says, Dharma regarding stupas. The Buddha was staying in the kingdom of Kosala and wondering. On one occasion, a Brahmin who was ploughing the earth saw the world-honoured one going by. Holding his ox stick on the ground for support, he bowed to the Buddha. The world-honoured one, having seen this, smiled. The Buddha told the bhikkhus, "You must request from this Brahmin this plot together with its mass of earth." The bhikkhus at once requested it, whereupon the Brahmin at once donated it. Having obtained the land, the world-honoured one then manifested a 7 treasure stupa of Kasyapa Buddha. Its height was 1 yohana, and the width of its front was a half yohana. The Brahmin, upon seeing it, immediately said to the Buddha, "World-honoured one, my family name is Kasyapa. This will be my Kasyapa's stupa." Then the world-honoured one, at that same abode, fashioned a stupa for Kasyapa Buddha. The bhikkhus said to the Buddha, "World-honoured one, may we contribute mud and earth or not?" The Buddha said, "You may contribute them." Then he preached the following verse: "Hundreds of thousands of pounds of pure gold brought for alms-giving do not equal a single ball of mud used with devout mind to build a Buddha's stupa." At that time, the world-honoured one himself constructed the stupa for Kasyapa Buddha. Its base was 4-sided and was surrounded by a handrail. The mound was of circular construction in 2 layers, with square tusks protruding in the 4 directions. The top, which was decked with banners and canopies, showed a long spire of rings. The Buddha said, "The method of building a stupa should be like this." The stupa had been completed. The world-honoured one, because he venerated the Buddhas of the past, then personally performed prostrations. The bhikkhus said to the Buddha, "World-honoured one, may we perform prostrations or not?" The Buddha said, "You may." Then he preached the following verse: Peoples hundreds of thousands of gifts of gold brought for almsgiving do not equal one good mind, bowing in veneration to a Buddha's stupa. At that time, people of the world, hearing that the world-honored one built the stupa, came bearing incense and flowers to offer to the world-honored one. The world-honored one, because he served offerings to the Buddhas of the past, then received the incense and flowers and took them to serve as offerings to the stupa. The bhikkhus said to the Buddha, "May we serve offerings or not?" The Buddha said, "You may." Then he preached the following verse: "Hundreds of thousands of carts of pure gold, brought for almsgiving, do not equal one good mind, with flowers and incense, serving offerings to a stupa." At that time, a great gathering came together like a cloud. The Buddha told Shariputra, "You will preach the Dharma for these people." The Buddha then preached the following verse: "Hundreds of thousands of Jambudvipas, filled with alms of pure gold, do not equal one gift of Dharma that causes others accordingly to train." At that time, among those seated in the assembly, there were some who attained the truth. The Buddha then preached the following verse: "Hundreds of thousands of worlds, filled with alms of pure gold, do not equal one gift of Dharma, according to which we see the genuine truth." At that time, the Brahman attained indestructible belief. At once he set before the stupa a meal for the Buddha and the Sangha. Then King Prasenajit, upon hearing about the world-honored one building Kasyapa Buddha's stupa, ordered 700 carts to be loaded with tiles, and he visited the Buddha's place. He bowed his head and face to the Buddha's feet and said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I desire to extend this stupa. May I do so or not?" The Buddha said, "You may." The Buddha told the great king, "During a past age, at the time of Kasyapa Buddha's parinirvana, there was a king named Good Fortune who intended to build a stupa of the 7 treasures. Then a retainer said to the king, 'In a future age, people who are against the Dharma will appear and will destroy this stupa, acquiring heavy sin. Solely, I beseech you, great king, make the stupa out of tiles and cover the surface with gold and silver. If someone takes the gold and silver, the stupa will still be able to remain intact.' The king, as the retainer advised, built the stupa out of tiles and covered it with gold leaf. Its height was 1 yohana, and the width of its front was a half yohana. The handrail was made of copper. After 7 years, 7 months, and 7 days, the stupa was built. After its completion, the king served offerings of incense and flowers to Kasyapa Buddha and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. King Prasenajit said to the Buddha, "That king was abundant with merit, and he possessed rare treasures. Now I shall build, but I will not be able to equal that king." Immediately he started building, and after 7 months and 7 days, the stupa was complete. After completing the stupa, King Prasenajit served offerings to the Buddha and to the Sangha of bhikkhus. The method of building a stupa. The base is 4-sided and surrounded by a handrail. The mound is of circular construction in 2 layers with square tusks protruding in the 4 directions. The top is decked with banners and canopies and shows a long spire of rings. If people say that the world-honored one, having dispelled greed, anger, and delusion, still has recourse to such a stupa, for that they will acquire a sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, because the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called the method of building a stupa. Stupa construction. When building a Sangharama, first survey in advance good land to make into the site for a stupa. Stupas must not be located in the south and must not be located in the west. They should be located in the east or should be located in the north. The monk's land must not encroach on the Buddha's land, and the Buddha's land must not encroach on the monk's land. If a stupa is close to a forest containing corpses, and if dogs might carry in leftovers and desecrate the site, a perimeter fence should be built. Monks' quarters should be built in the west or in the south. Water from the monk's land must not be allowed to run onto the Buddha's land. But water from the Buddha's land may run onto the monk's land. A stupa should be built on a high and prominent site. It is not permissible within the stupa perimeter to wash or to dye robes, or to dry them in the sun, or to wear leather shoes, or to cover the head, or to cover the shoulder, or to hack and spit on the ground. If people speak as follows: "Does the world-honored one, already having dispelled greed, anger, and delusion, still need a stupa?" then they will acquire a sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, because the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called stupa construction. Stupa niches. At that time, King Prasenajit visited the Buddha, bowed head and face at his feet, and said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, in building the stupa for Kasyapa Buddha, may we make niches or not? The Buddha said, "You may." During a past age, after Kasyapa Buddha's parinirvana, the king, Good Fortune, erected a stupa for Kasyapa Buddha, and in its 4 aspects he built niches. For their upper parts, he fashioned images of lions and all sorts of colourful paintings. For their fronts, he made railings. The niches were a place to put flowers. Inside the niches, he hung banners and canopies. If people say that the world-honoured one, having dispelled greed, anger, and delusion, still takes pleasure in his own glorification, they will acquire a sin equal to transgressing the Vinaya, and the karmic retribution will be heavy. This is called stupa niches. Clearly, we have seen that in the state beyond the Buddha effect of Bodhi, to erect a stupa to eternal Buddhas and to perform prostrations and offerings to it is the usual method of the Buddhas. Episodes like this are numerous, but for the present I shall just quote this one. With respect to the Buddha Dharma, the existence school is supreme, and within that school, the Vinaya is most fundamental. The Vinaya was first brought to China by Hokken, after he had cleared a way through brambles and thorns to India and climbed Vulture Peak. The Dharma that has been authentically transmitted from patriarch to patriarch is exactly in conformity with the doctrine of existence. Number 3. To serve offerings to what is actually present means directly to face the bodies of Buddhas and Kaichas and to perform the service of offerings. Number 4. To serve offerings to what is not actually present means widely to perform the service of offerings to Buddhas and Kaichas that are not actually present. That is to say, both in their presence and not in their presence, we serve offerings to Buddhas and to Kaichas and stupas. We also make offerings to Buddhas and to Kaichas and stupas that are not actually present. Serving offerings to what is actually present acquires great merits. Serving offerings to what is not actually present acquires great merits, because the state is magnanimous and wide. Serving offerings to the present and the non-present alike acquires the greatest of great merits. Number 5. Service of offerings performed by oneself means serving offerings with one's own body to Buddhas and to Kaichas. Number 6. Service of offerings performed by others to Buddhas and to Kaichas means causing others, if they have some small possession, not to be lazy in offering it. That is to say, regarding service of offerings by self and by others, we do either one equally. Service of offerings performed by oneself acquires great merits. Causing others to serve offerings acquires great merits. Serving offerings in the state of unity, of self and others, acquires the greatest of great merits. In number 7, serving offerings of property to Buddhas and to Kachas, stupas and satras, there are said to be 3 kinds of property. 1. Offerings of necessity goods, namely clothing, food, and so on. 2. Offerings of venerative goods, namely incense, flowers, and so on. And 3. Offerings of decorative goods, namely all other treasures, adornments, and so on. In number 8, serving offerings of excellence, there are 3 kinds of excellence. 1. Just devotedly to perform the service of miscellaneous offerings. 2. With pure believing mind, to believe in the weight of the Buddha's virtue, and to serve offerings accordingly. And 3. While experiencing the will to transfer merit, and the will to pursue the state of Buddha, to perform the service of offerings. In number 9, untainted service of offerings, there are 2 kinds of untaintedness. 1. The mind being untainted, being free from all transgressions. And 2. Property being untainted, being free from violations of the Dharma. Number 10 is serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. That is to say, service of offerings following realization of the effect is called serving offerings of the attainment of the state of truth. The Buddha effect is the state to be attained, and the practice of serving offerings which can attain that state is itself called attainment of the state of truth. Serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth is either called serving offerings of Dharma, or called serving offerings of deeds. Within it there are 3 categories. 1. Serving offerings of property may be serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. 2. Serving offerings of joy may be serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. And 3. Serving offerings of practice may be serving offerings of attainment of the state of truth. The service of offerings to Buddha includes these 10 services of offerings listed already. For Dharma and for Sangha, similar categories also apply. Namely, to serve offerings to Dharma means to serve offerings to the teaching of principles and the methods of practice that the Buddha expounded, and also to serve offerings to volumes of the sutras. To serve offerings to the Sangha means to serve offerings to all sacred beings of the three vehicles, and to their kaichas, statues, and stupas, and to monks who are common men. Next, the mind in serving offerings is of 6 kinds. 1. The supreme mind of the field of happiness. Within the field of happiness, it produces the greatest excellence. 2. The supreme mind, which recognizes benevolence. All virtuous joys have appeared by virtue of the 3 treasures. 3. The appearance of the mind that is supremely excellent among all living beings. 4. The mind that is as hard to meet as the Udambara flower. 5. The singular and independent, undivided mind, which is one with the 3,000 great thousandfold world. 6. The mind which in all worldly areas and areas beyond the world is completely equipped with reliable criteria. For example, the Tathagata, being in complete possession of worldly and world-transcendent methods, is able to provide for living beings a basis on which to rely. This is called being completely equipped with reliable criteria. If, with these 6 minds, we serve offerings to the 3 treasures, even if it is only something small, we will be able to secure countless and infinite merits. How much more if that offering is plentiful? Such service of offerings we should perform unfailingly, with sincere mind. It has been performed without fail by the Buddhas. Stories about it are evident throughout the sutras and Vinaya. At the same time, the Buddhist patriarchs themselves have personally handed down its authentic transmission. Days and months of waiting in attendance and doing work are just times of serving offerings. The standards for placement of statues and sariras, for serving offerings and doing prostrations, and for building stupas and building kaichas, have been authentically transmitted only in the house of the Buddhist patriarchs. They are not authentically transmitted to anyone other than the descendants of the Buddhist patriarchs. Further, if standards are not authentically transmitted in accordance with the Dharma, they will contravene the Dharma standards. When the service of offerings contravenes the Dharma standards, it is not genuine. If the service of offerings is not genuine, its merits is spare. Without fail, we should learn and receive the authentic transmission of the method of serving offerings, which accords with the Dharma. Zen Master Reito spent years and months attending to the site of Soke's stupa and the temple servant row, not resting day or night, pounded rice to serve to the assembly. These instances were entirely the service of offerings in accordance with the Dharma. They are a small sample of such instances, which I do not have time to quote extensively. We should serve offerings like this. A day during the summer retreat in the 7th year of Kencho.